They will never have both, okay? And it is surrounded by a protein coat called as capsid, and together they are called as nucleocapsid. Okay, some viruses are enveloped, they have an outer coating around the nucleocapsid, okay? I told you this. So, according to the genetic material, we can either classify them as a DNA virus or RNA virus, okay? So, nucleic acids can be either single or double. So, it can be single-stranded RNA, double-stranded DNA, or single-stranded DNA or double-stranded RNA. Clear? So capsids actually it is composed of number of repeated proteins, subunits, polypeptides are there. It is called as capsomere together. The function is actually it protects the nucleic acid core from the external environment. It helps the viruses survive and thrive. Clear? There are some non-enveloped viruses. This capsid will initiate the first step of viral replication, okay? And these are antigenic, this has antigenic properties. Clear? So, according to the symmetry, based on the arrangement of the capsomere, we can divide them into different types, okay? So, this is icosahedral symmetry. This is mainly cubical, okay? So, all the DNA viruses has icosahedral symmetry. Most of the RNA viruses are also icosahedral symmetry. Clear? This is there in the book, okay? Then you have helical symmetry. So RNA viruses such as myxovirus, rhabdovirus, filovirus and Bunya viruses. So you need to know example of each symmetry. These questions can be asked either as Viva or as MCQ. Please remember at least 2 to 3 examples of each type of symmetry. Clear? Then there is complex symmetry that you see in pox virus, okay? So this is the envelope. So envelope, I told you it surrounds the nucleocapsid, okay? So there it is lipoprotein in nature. The lipid part actually it is derived from the host cell. What is host cell? Yes, exactly, okay? And the protein part is actually virus coded, and it is made up of the peplomas, okay? So what are the peplomas? Can you see there is spike surrounding the viruses? Yes, these are the peplomas. Can you name an example of any virus which has spikes outside? Very good. Other than that, most of the viruses, they told me the name already. Very good. Another? Retrovirus is same. You'll learn it later on, don't worry. Other than that, one more respiratory virus, it is very common. Respiratory. Rotavirus is for GI. Very good. Influenza virus. Clear? So I told you most of the viruses are enveloped. Now you might get a question during your exam. What are the examples of non-enveloped viruses? You have to know, okay? So non-enveloped DNA viruses are parvo, adeno and pepova, okay? And non-enveloped RNA viruses are picorna, Rio, calci, hepatitis A, hepatitis E. So other than that, rest all RNA viruses are enveloped and the rest all DNA viruses are also enveloped. Clear? Sizes of the virus. The sizes varies from 20 to 300 nanometer. The smallest virus is parvovirus, largest is pox. Please remember this, okay? So this image, can you see this one? Actually, this is one bacilli, Escherichia coli. We have taught you during your microscope class, Escherichia coli, that one bacilli, in that this many viruses can fit. Can you see the size? Now you can imagine how much small it is. Okay, smallest parvovirus, largest pox virus. Okay, now I hope you all have an idea. So you must know different shapes of viruses as well. Okay, so rabies virus is of bullet shape, Ebola is filamentous, pox virus is brick shaped, adeno is space vehicle shaped, rota is wheel shaped, and tobacco mosaic virus is rod shaped. Okay, so now you must know what are viroids. Viroids are actually nothing but naked, circular, small, single-stranded RNA without capsid. Okay, they're mostly restricted to plants and they depends on host enzymes for replication. Okay, then another thing called as prions. You will later learn about prion diseases. Okay, so prion consists of abnormal infectious protein molecules without any nucleic acid. Remember that there is no nucleic acid. Viruses has nucleic acids, okay? And they are highly resistant to physical and chemical agents for sterilization and disinfectants. So another way to classify is depending on the nomenclature. I told you depending on the type of genetic material what they have. Okay, it is either DNA virus or RNA virus. Okay, so in DNA virus, again, when you classify, you have to remember these headings: the family, DNA type, envelope, symmetry, size, and representative virus. That means if we say herpes viridae is name of the family. Okay, under that these representative viruses are there. Under herpes viridae, these are herpes simplex virus 1, 2, varicella zoster, Epstein-Barr, cytomegalo, human herpes virus 6, 7, 8. So what happens is under the same family there are different representative viruses and they almost have same characters. Okay, so they are all double-stranded linear, they are enveloped and they have icosahedral symmetry and the sizes varies from 150 to 200 nanometer. You have to learn this. It will take little bit time, but it is like how do you learn? I'll tell you. First, you have to remember the family name. Under that family, you first learn about the characters of the family. That is easier. After that, you learn 2 or 3 examples of the representative viruses of that family. Clear? So this is how we classify them. This is DNA viruses. These are all DNA virus and these are all RNA virus. Again, in RNA virus, Picorna viridae. In Picorna viridae, this is single-stranded positive sense. It is non-enveloped, icosahedral, and the representative viruses are poliovirus, Coxsackie virus, ecovirus, enterovirus, rhinovirus, hepatitis A virus. At least know 2 or 3 examples of each family. Clear? Then viral replication. So they undergo a very complex kind of cell division. As I told you, it is not a binary fission. Okay. So how do they do? There are 6 crucial steps. First is attachment, then is penetration, uncoating, biosynthesis, maturation, and release. Okay. So attachment. First attachment, how do they do? What was the outer layer of the virus? Outermost spikes. Envelop the spikes, peplomers. So how they do is, they cannot just go and attach and start the attachment step. Okay, so there is a receptor in the outer part of the peplomers and host cell also has another receptor. Both the receptor will bind together and then the attachment happens. Okay, clear? This is how attachment happens. Clear? What is there? One receptor is there in the peplomer or the outermost layer of the virus, and then there is another receptor in the host cell. Both will bind together and attachment will happen. This is called as receptor interactions. Okay. Then is penetration. Now attachment has happened. Now penetration will take part. Penetration can happen by phagocytosis, membrane fusion, and injection of the nucleic acid. What is phagocytosis? All of you have learned about it during your biology class. What is it? Engulfing of the foreign material by the? Yes, very good. Okay. Next is uncoating. So now uncoating of the virus will take place and then the nucleic acid of the virus will get released in the cytoplasm of the host cell. I have simplified it as much as possible so that you can understand it, okay? But these steps, there is always a little bit of modification and variation for different viruses. Okay, so when you learn individual viruses, you'll have to see what are the different steps, that is extra steps that is taking place for that particular organism. Clear? Then is biosynthesis. So for this, viral components are synthesized. Nucleic acid, capsid protein, enzyme that is required for various stages of the viral replication, and regulatory protein that will shut down the host cell metabolism. Okay? Then, where does the nucleic acid replication will take place? For DNA viruses, mostly it will take place in the nucleus, okay? Except for pox virus, where the DNA will be synthesized in the cytoplasm, okay? And for RNA virus, the replication will take place in the cytoplasm, except for retrovirus and orthomyxoviruses, where the RNA is synthesized in the nucleus, okay? Please know the exceptions. Which are the exceptions? So this is the biosynthesis of DNA virus, okay? Please know how it is done. First is transcription of early genes, and then replication of viral DNA, then is transcription of late genes, and then assembly of nucleocapsids, then the progeny cells are formed, the daughter virions, okay? There's little bit of different for RNA viruses, okay? So RNA viruses, you have positive and negative sense, single or double strand RNA. So 4 types are there. So 4 types of biosynthesis will be there. One is type 1, type 2. Type 1 is for positive sense single strand RNA virus. For type 2, it is negative sense single strand RNA virus. Type 3 is double strand RNA virus, and type 4 is for retrovirus. Okay. So what is retrovirus? It is, example is HIV virus. Okay. Then comes the step assembly. Okay. So this viral nucleic acid and the proteins that are packed together will form the progeny viruses, which is, and then this will, I told you, this will either take place in the nucleus or the cytoplasm of the host cell, okay? So DNA viruses mostly are assembled in the nucleus, except hepatinavirus and pox virus, which will take place in the cytoplasm, and RNA virus are assembled in the cytoplasm, okay? Then comes release, the 7th step, okay? During release, what will happen? Lysis of the host cell where the replication took place, okay? And then budding through the host cell membrane that you will see in the envelope viruses. Am I clear? So, there is certain thing called as dependoviruses or defective viruses. Actually, these viruses are genetically defective. They cannot perform this viral replication step by themselves. They need help of another virus which can supplement the deficiency. Okay, so example is hepatitis B virus, hepatitis D virus, okay? Hepatitis D virus requires a help from hepatitis B virus. So whenever a patient has hepatitis D, we always screen the patient by default for hepatitis B virus. Clear? That means if a person has hepatitis D, he or she will definitely have hepatitis B as well. So this is an example for defective viruses or dependoviruses. Then there is certain thing called as genetic modifications in viruses. One is mutation. So you all have learned about mutants through movie. Which movie we all talk about mutants? Wolverine, X-Men. Yes. So what happened to those mutants in those movies? What happened? Genetically something they have modified, isn't it? To thrive better than the others, isn't it? One is mutation, the other one is interactions between viral genes or their gene products. That is, it can be either protein or lipoprotein, okay? So in mutation, what happens during every viral infection at a frequency of 10 to the power 4 to 10 to the power 8 mutations per base per generation can take place. This is evident only if it induces some readily observable property, okay, or it leads to survival or death of the virus. Otherwise, we cannot find out whether a mutation has occurred or not. Okay, so mutation can be, it can occur spontaneously or it can be chemically induced. Okay, how we can chemically induce it? By any physical agents such as UV light or irradiation. Okay, so types of mutations. One is conditional lethal mutant. So this mutants can only grow in specific conditions. Okay, so if you take them out from the specific condition, they cannot survive or thrive. Okay, then another call as temperature sensitive mutant. This can grow at low temperature like 28 to 31, but it is very restrictive at 37 degrees. That is, at in human body they have restrictions, okay, because of the higher temperature. So this actually, how does it help us? It actually, this temperature sensitive mutant, it helps us in preparation of live viral vaccines. Okay, example is influenza vaccine. So interactions between viral genes. What happens here is two or more virus particles will, when they infect the host cell, what will happen? There occurs a variety of interactions between genetic and non-genetic materials. Okay, then is genetic recombination. What is genetic recombination? It occurs between two different but related viruses of the same family when they infect a host cell simultaneously. Okay, there's another thing called as reassortment. Reassortment is a type of recombination. It is seen in segmented RNA viruses such as influenza, rota, bunia and arena viruses. Okay, when these two strains of influenza viruses, they infect the host cell, gene exchanges will take place, okay, between these RNA segments, in resulting the production of assortment. Then another thing called as viral interference. Viral interference is when two viruses, they infect a host cell and it leads to inhibition of one of the virus. So one of the virus will inhibit another virus. Okay. So OPV is one of the classical example of viral interference. So what happens is, in OPV is we administer the OPV serotypes in the human. Yes, how do we do it? Through vaccination. Yes. So this OPV serotypes with the spread of will interfere with the spread of wild polioviruses. Okay. So what do you think? OPV is a live vaccine or not? It's an interference. So live vaccine. So pathogenesis, one is you have to know transmission. Transmission means which is the point of entry of the certain viruses. Point of entry is not same for all the viruses, okay? It differs from viruses to viruses. Then you have to remember where is the primary site of replication. And then from primary site of replication, there is spread to the secondary site. Then there is manifestation of the disease. So again, here, when you learn about it, you have to remember the mode of transmission, then your local infection or the portal of entry, then spread to distant sites from the portal entry. Okay, so in respiratory route, this influenza viruses will produce what? What does it produce? Anyone? Influenza virus? Respiratory symptoms. Okay. So this viruses will produce local infection at the site of portal entry. Clear? But these organisms, these viruses, they will spread to the distant site from the portal of entry. So their route of transmission is respiratory. but they will manifest it somewhere else in the distant sites. Clear? So see, measles virus, mumps, rubella, varicella, zoster, cytomegalovirus, parvo, smallpox. Smallpox. What are the symptoms of smallpox? Pox in the skin, blisters. But the route of transmission is respiratory. So it is very much distant from the primary route of transmission. Am I clear? This is how I'm trying to tell you. See, parainfluenza virus. This produces infection at the site of portal entry. So route of transmission for them is respiratory route. What are the type of manifestations they do it in the host? Respiratory symptoms at the site of portal entry, isn't it? Then mumps. How does a patient with mumps present? Enlargement of the neck. So, but the mode of transmission for mumps is respiratory route. Am I clear? You have to know all this. Okay, I'm running short of time. I have to finish fungus also. So same, cutaneous route. See, human papilloma viruses, molluscum contagiosum viruses, the local infection will be produced at the site of portal entry. But herpes simplex virus, where does it forms? Herpes simplex. Okay, we'll cover it when we go to the systems. Please learn these examples, okay? Herpes has systematic manifestations. Okay, so pathogenesis. I have spoken about pathogenesis. Yes. Then manifestations. Incubation period. What is incubation period? You might have learned during the bacterial infection as well. What is incubation period? From the time of entry to the time of appearance of the first symptom. Okay, that is called as incubation period. So it depends on the distance between site of the entry and the target organs. Okay, so it is shorter if the target organ is very much near to the site of portal entry, like as for example influenza, I just told you now. Okay, and longer if the site of entry and the target organ is far away from each other. Okay, this is very much, you can see it in polio and rabies viruses. What is clinical manifestations? You have learned. Okay, after the organism enters in the body. So this can be divided into clinical and subclinical. Okay, subclinical is inapparent infection and apparent infections are clinical. Okay, and it can be divided into acute, subacute and chronic depending on the type of onset. Okay. Then there is certain thing called as cell death. Okay, so viruses will adopt different mechanisms to induce the cell death in the hosts. Okay, so how do they do? They either inhibit the host cell DNA. This is mainly seen it in herpes virus, or they'll inhibit the host cell protein synthesis. This is classically done by the polio virus. Then fusion and immune mediated lysis. Okay, there are certain infections that can take place without cell death. Okay. Then there is certain thing called as latent infection. That is persistent infection is called as otherwise called as latent infection. This is mainly seen it in herpes viridae family. Okay. Then cell transformation can be seen by oncogenic viruses. After the viruses infect the host cell, they will induce certain cell transformation in the host body. Because of that, what do you mean by oncogenic virus? Oncogenic means cancer. So because of the transformation of the host cell, they will induce a cancer in the human body. Clear? Then latency can be seen in HIV patients and another thing called as slow virus infection. We will cover it later, okay? Then there is another thing, because of the replication of the viruses, certain characters in the host cells will change. Because of the change, this change can be detected by histopathological staining. This changes, whatever takes place in the host cell, are called as inclusion body. Okay, so this inclusion body has specific character for specific viral infections. So you need to know example of the inclusion bodies. They are intracytoplasmic as well as intranuclear. The intracytoplasmic inclusion bodies are Negri bodies. Negri bodies are seen in rabies. These questions will be asked to you. Examples of Negri bodies. Suppose if a question comes, example of Negri body, example of inclusion body. If you write Negri bodies, Passion body, Bollinger bodies, you will get half of the marks. So whenever a question on inclusion body comes, you have to mention in which viral disease it is seen, or it is seen because of which virus. Okay, so if you say Negri bodies is example of inclusion body, you have to mention that it is seen in rabies virus. Okay, if you say Passion body, it is seen in variola virus. Clear? And this is example of intracytoplasmic. These are intranuclear inclusion bodies. It can be divided into powdery type A, type B, and intracytoplasmic and intranuclear inclusion bodies. These are owl-eye appearance seen in cytomegalovirus and in measles as well. Clear? Let's go to the important part, laboratory diagnosis. So how do we do laboratory diagnosis? It cannot be grown. It can be grown, but it is very much expensive to grow a virus in the lab. So what do we do for that? So anybody has suffered with dengue here? Anyone? Yes. So dengue is a virus, yes? So what did they do? Platelets. Platelets is to correlate the progression of the disease. Okay, but to diagnose, anybody can have low platelet counts. Okay, dengue is one of the reason. Okay, how did they confirm that you have dengue? Some tests they might have done, right? So I hope all of you know the concept of antigen and antibody. Yes. So what are antigens? Antigen will be always present in one of the component of the viruses. Okay, mainly in the outer portion. And what are the antibodies? What is antibodies? Yes, correct. So what are the type of antibodies? IgG, IgM, IgA, IgG. Yes, you need to remember all these things. So this were taught in first phase. Which subject? So you have to remember what you were taught. These are all correlating with each other, okay? So I'll tell you why did I ask you about the antibody. I'll just tell you now. Okay, so why do we need to diagnose? One is to start the antiviral drugs. Another, to screen for the blood donors, okay, from HIV, hepatitis B and hepatitis C. Okay, and another thing is for surveillance purpose, and another one is for outbreak and epidemic investigation, or to start post-exposure prophylaxis. What is post-exposure prophylaxis? Post-exposure, the name itself is self-explanatory. After exposure, we start a treatment. So in later phases, when you become interns, you will be dealing with a lot of reactive patients. They can be either hepatitis B, HIV. Suppose you come in contact, the body fluid comes in contact with you. Comes in contact in the sense, do you think if you touch their body fluid accidentally, does it mean that you have to start the post-exposure prophylaxis? No. There are criteria for you to start post-exposure prophylaxis. Suppose there is a splash injury. You are trying to inject a drug and it comes back and gets inside your eyes. And you come to know the person is reactive. You go back and check the person's status first thing first. Okay, so whenever this happens, first thing first, you have to go and inform your superior, and then you have to check the status of the patient. If the status comes reactive, the person is positive, then what you have to do is you have to start the post-exposure prophylaxis. After that, after finishing the course, again you check your status, then accordingly we plan the next step. Clear? So, we spoke about this in our SGT sessions about the types of microscopes. So, which microscopes can we use? Electron microscope. Okay. So, this immunoelectron microscope will enhance the electron microscope, whatever we can see there. And then we can use fluorescent microscopes also. Then by detection of various antigens and antibody. So, in the earliest phase of the disease, which one shall we try to find out first, antigen or antibody? Huh? Antigen, correct. Then later on we go and we look for the antibodies, okay, specific antibodies for the specific organism, okay. So detection of the antibodies can be done by neutralization test, CFT, or we have newer formats, diagnostic formats like ELISA, ICT, flow through assays, okay. Then I told you isolating a virus is very, very much difficult, okay, but for research purposes we can still do it. We can do by animal inoculation, embryonated egg inoculation, and tissue culture. So this we have all learned during our SGT session, electron microscope. Then drawbacks, you all know, it was taught during the SGT session, yes. Then immunoelectron microscope, the sensitivity and specificity of the electron microscope can be enhanced when specific antibody to the specimen is added, okay. So what will happen is, the sediment is negatively stained and it is viewed under the electron microscope. Okay, these are the specific viral antigens we have to detect. This HBsAg, hepatitis B surface antigen. The antigen is present in the surface of the virus. Okay, we are targeting specific antigen for specific virus. We have to be very specific. Okay. Then NS1 antigen for detection of dengue virus from the patient's serum. Okay. P24 antigen is detected from the serum of a patient for HIV. Clear? For rotavirus, we detect rotavirus antigen from the diarrheal stool. So you have to be very specific what is your target antigen and what type of sample you need. Okay. Then comes the antibodies. How do you detect antibody? Which antibody comes first? Our target antibodies are IgM and IgG. What happens? Marker. Okay, I'll just show you. This is a graph, okay? For IgM and IgG, our target antibodies are IgM and IgG. When we are targeting certain IgM for infection, IgM will rise and will come down. Okay, this is for IgM. IgG, to say it is active infection, there should be 4-fold rise in IgG. What happens is, IgG will go up and it will go into plateau phase for a very long time. So IgG can be detected in even after 6 months of the infection. So just because the IgG is detected for a certain infection, you cannot rule out that the infection is active. Clear? First, IgM should be there, but then the IgM will come down after a certain period of time. IgG 4-fold rise should be there, and then it goes into plateau phase for almost 6 to 8 months, depending on the type of organism. Am I clear? So what is your target antibodies done for detecting? IgG and IgM. IgG should be 4-fold rise in that. Clear? So here even you see presence of IgG antibody does not always indicate the current infection. It can be either chronic or past infection. Okay, so these are the antibodies we target: anti HBC, anti HBs, anti HBA for hepatitis B. These are antibodies. Okay, anti hepatitis C antibodies, antibodies again HIV 1 and 2. Then molecular methods. So you all have learned about molecular methods during biochemistry. Yes. So PCR, polymerase chain reaction, reverse transcripted PCR, multiplex PCR formats we have, biofilm, biofire film array, real-time PCR. Okay. So this is the egg inoculation I was talking about. So the egg which we get it in the market, can we use that for egg inoculation? Why? Huh? Sterilized? No, not about sterilized. What kind of egg do we get in market? Unfertilized. You need fertilized egg. This structure you will never find in the eggs which we get in the market. We need fertilized egg for egg inoculation. Okay, so 4 targets we have for egg inoculation. One is yolk sac inoculation, amniotic sac, allantoic sac, chorioallantoic membrane. Okay, then comes the tissue culture. Organ culture used to be done in the earlier stages, but it has become obsolete now. Explant culture has also become obsolete. What we do right now is cell line culture. Primary cell line can be done, secondary or diploid cell line culture can be done. Okay, these are the cell lines I was talking about: HEP2 cell line, HeLa cell line, Vero cell line, human lung fibroblast cell line. These are all normals, okay, before the inoculation. So what do we see in the cell cultures? We look for any kind of cytopathic effect in the cells. Shell vial technique can be done. Okay. So what are the types of cytopathic effects you see? In enteroviruses, you see rapid crenation and degeneration of the entire cell sheet. In adenovirus, you see large granular clumps resembling bunches of grapes. Let's go to fungus. Okay. So you should know classification of fungi, laboratory diagnosis of the fungal infections. So don't worry, whatever I have taught is just an overview. Later on, when we go into system and specific viruses, it will be taught to you in details. Okay, this is just an overview how to approach a viral infection. Okay. So what is this? Fungus is derived from a Greek word called as mycis. Mycis means mushroom. Okay. So these are eukaryotic cells. It has cell organelles. Okay. It possesses rigid cell walls. It is composed of chitin, beta glucans and other polysaccharides. Why you need to know what it consists of? Because later on, when we go for lab diagnosis, this will be the target places. These are the places where we target for any laboratory diagnosis. Okay, like for aspergillus, any aspergillosis, we go for beta D glucan. We target beta D glucan for diagnosis of any aspergillosis. Okay. So the cell membrane contains ergosterol. This can be unicellular or multicellular. They lack chlorophyll. They divide by asexual or bisexual means by producing spores. So how do we classify? One is morphological classification. Yeast are round or oval cells. They produce by budding. Okay. Example, you must know one example of each. Example is Cryptococcus neoformans and Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Yeast-like. You might have heard about this organism. Yes? Candida. Has everybody heard about Candida? Candida is yeast-like. Okay. How do we differentiate between the yeast and the yeast-like? Yeast-like has pseudohyphae. Okay. Then molds. When we keep a bread outside for very long time, we see something is growing from there, isn't it? Those are molds. Okay. Clear? And these molds have hyphae. These are either septate hyphae or non-septate hyphae. Then next we have is dimorphic fungi. Okay. So another classification we can do is based on the growth pattern in the culture medium. It can be aerial mycelium. Okay. Here what happens is it projects above the surface of the culture media. And next is vegetative mycelium. It grows on the surface of the culture media. Then I was talking to you about dimorphic fungi. Dimorphic fungi, it exists in mold form in the environment, that is in ambient temperature of 25 degree. Okay, but in human tissues at body temperature, it becomes yeast. Clear? So examples are Histoplasma capsulatum, Blastomyces dermatidis, Coccidioides and Paracoccidioides. So this first one is a budding yeast cell. Okay, these are the budding. This is the budding yeast cell with pseudo hyphae. Can you see? There are constrictions. Okay. Then you have aseptate hyphae. There are no septas. These are septate hyphae. There are septations you can see. These are mycelium. Then on taxonomy, how do we classify them? One is phylum Zygomycota. Example is Rhizopus and Mucor. They possess zygospores and aseptate hyphae. You have to know all these classifications, okay? And then next is phylum Ascomycota. They have septate hyphae and ascospores. Example is Aspergillus. Then you have phylum Basidiomycota. They have basidiospore. Example is Cryptococcus. Then you have phylum Deuteromycota. Okay, they are in sexual state. They're either absent or unidentified. These are the examples. Zygospores is observed in Zygomycetes. Ascospores are observed in Aspergillus. Okay, these examples you have to know. Then lab diagnosis of fungi. So what are the type of samples you have to take? So remember, wherever is the manifestation, you have to take the sample from there. Most of the fungal infections you will see in soft tissues, okay, or subcutaneous tissues. So if most of the fungal infections you mostly see in skin. Skin, what do? You take skin scraping. You have seen your anatomy scalpel blade? Yes. This part, this edge is sharp, the opposite part is blunt. With the help of the blunt side, you take the skin scraping in a sterile container. Then you transport it to the lab. Suppose if it is hair follicle infection or hair infection, what do? You pluck the hair from the root and then you transport it to the in a sterile manner to the lab. Suppose there is nail infection, what do? You take nail clipping. Depending on the site of infection, you will decide your type of sample. Clear? There can be corneal ulcer, so you have to take corneal scraping. Okay? So if it is a systemic manifestation, then you have to either take blood or you will have to take cerebrospinal fluid, depending on the type of infection. Clear? Then in microscopy, what do? We take the sample, then we put it under the microscope. So direct microscopy can be done. Can you see the fungal filaments? So I told you in the SGT classes that we cannot see a direct thing under the microscope unless some enhancement is added to it. Either you have to stain, you have to do something, yes. For fungal also, actually this KOH is actually, this mount is actually, stain is not added here. What we add is potassium hydroxide. This is called as potassium hydroxide preparation. So potassium hydroxide, what it does is, there These are all keratinized tissues, skin, hair, nails. Keratin is present there. What the potassium hydroxide does is it digests the keratinized cells. It breaks down the keratinized cells. So whatever fungal filaments are there in the cells, because of the breakdown of the cells, it will come outside and we can visualize it clearly. Okay. So this hyphae is actually without any stains. This is only under the light microscope. Okay. So depending on the type of tissue, we decide the percentage of potassium hydroxide. 10% is mainly used for skin, where very less keratinized cells are there. For thicker tissues, we go for higher concentration of potassium hydroxide, like nails, hairs. So there you need 20%. So sometimes you need to keep the sample in potassium hydroxide for overnight, depending on the type of tissues like nails, or you can keep it for even half an hour and 1 hour like skin scrapings, and you can focus it under the light microscope. So this is direct under the light microscope. So sometimes what happens is, because of the less enhancement, we cannot differentiate between whether it is septate hyphae or aseptate hyphae. Okay, so for that what we do is we add this chalcofluor white stain. Can you see here, enhancement is much better than the first image. Okay, so here we can see there are septas. Okay, so we add the chalcofluor white stain, and then what it does is it binds to the cellulose and chitin of the fungal cell wall. I was telling you, fungal cell wall has chitin. That's why you need to know what it consists of, what the cell wall consists of. Okay, so it targets the chitin in the fungal cell wall. It binds to it, and under the UV light it fluoresces. Okay, so what kind of microscope we should use here? Very good. Okay. So other than that, what else we can do is we can do gram stain. Gram staining is mainly done for the yeast and the yeast-like. So example is Candida, Cryptococcus neoformans. Okay. So yes, very good. So in gram stain, they appear as gram-positive budding yeast cells. Okay. Then another kind of stain which you can use is India ink and nigrosin stains. These are negative stains. So the Cryptococcus, they have capsule around them. Okay. So what we do is we take the sample, we take a drop of sample on the slide, and then we take a drop of nigrosin stain or India ink stain, and then we put a cover slip on that, and then we focus it under 40x. What we see is the background will become black because of the stain, and the organism will also become black because of the stain, but because of the presence of capsule, there will be a halo surrounding the organism. You'll see a halo. Okay, this is why it is called as negative stain. Then there are histopathological stains like periodic acid Schiff stain. You will learn it in pathology class. I'm not going in details about it. Then you have Mason-Fontana stain, hematoxylin eosin stain, gomorymethamine silver stain. All these are histopathological stain. You can take the tissue sample and stain it. Okay. Then we have lactophenol cotton blue. What is lactophenol cotton blue? Once we culture the organism, we grow it in the agar. Then when the hyphae are formed, when the myceliums are there, we take the mycelium, we tease it, and we put a drop of lactophenol cotton blue, and we put a cover slip on that. You can see it very nicely. What happens here is the phenol which is present in the stain acts as disinfectant. The lactic acid will preserve the morphology of the fungi. Glycerol will prevent it from drying, and cotton blue will stain the fungal elements blue. Okay. Then for culture, mainly we use is Sabarots dextrose agar. We have neutral Sabarots dextrose agar. It is called as Emmons modification. Then we have cornmeal agar and rice starch agar, brain heart infusion, brain agar, blood agar, Niger seed agar, bird seed agar. Chrome agar is mainly used for Candida. So different species of Candida will have different colors when they grow. Okay. Mostly the temperature we require to grow a fungus is 25 to 30. Okay, except the dimorphic fungi. Dimorphic fungi can both grow at 25 degree and 37 degree. So in 25 degree, it will be in which stage, which form? 20, yes, very good. At 37? Very good. So we need special incubator for it. It is called as BOD incubators, biological oxygen demand. Okay. So here it is capable of maintaining low temperature. Incubation period is 2 to 3 weeks. So sometimes we can add certain antibiotics to inhibit the bacterial growth because we are incubating it for very long period. Okay. It is cycloheximide, chloramphenicol and gentamicin. I told you once it grows, once the mycelium grows, we do LPCB mount and we try to identify it. So according to the rate of growth, we can again differentiate it into rapid growth and slow growth. Rapid growth examples are mostly the opportunistic mycosis like saprophytes and yeasts, and slow growths are dermatophytes, subcutaneous and systemic mycosis it causes. Okay. So what do we do? After it grows in the agar, we see the pigmentation it produces. Pigmentation is seen in the reverse, okay? And the texture. How do we see a texture? Can we touch? No. But how it presents, if we are allowed to touch, that's what we have to imagine, okay? So it can be powdery, it can be velvety, it can be waxy, leathery. So, see, I was telling you, so we have to see, this is behind the plate. This is what we call it. We see the pigment produced in the reverse, behind the growth. Can you see it's very different color, it's orangish pigment. And here it is what kind? It is powdery. Okay. Can you see? The reverse has different color. This is how we check. Okay, this is the reverse, this is the front. Clear? I told you about it. We tease the, so once it grows like this, we take the mold from here, we tease it on a slide, we put a drop of lactophenol cotton blue and we see whether it has septas, aseptates or septations are there, hyaline or phaeoid, narrow or wide. Okay. And we see what type of sporulation it is, conidia or sporangia. This is a type of culture. This is called as slide culture. Okay. Another thing we can do is cellotape tape mount. What is cellophane tape mount? Once the mycelias are grown, sometimes to take and tease it, we sometimes disrupt the morphology. So we take a cellophane tape on a plate, mycelias are growing, we take the tape on the mycelia, we put it, like how you take thumb impression. On a sellotape, you put your thumb and your impression comes out, isn't it? Same like that. We take the cellophane tape, we put it on the mycelia and take the mycelium and put it back on the slide and we put a drop of lactophenol cotton glue. That's it. We don't put any cover slip on that. Okay. So other than that, other types of identifications are for candida, we do germ tube test, Dalmau plate culture. For dermatophytes, we do hair perforation test, dermatophyte test. Okay. Then again for lab diagnosis, we either go for antigen detection or antibody detection. Okay. It can be done by ELISA, by complement fixation test, latex agglutination test. Then we go for immunohistochemistry. Then comes the automations. Once the organism grows, we can identify it through automations also. It can be done by either Maldito or Vitek. Then again, PCR can be done for molecular. Clear? At least retain 20% from today's class. It will help you for the next classes when we go for system approach. Clear? Okay.